Hi, I'm Mackenzie. My father-in-law kicked me out of the family estate, and my own husband did nothing to stop it. But that wasn't the worst part. The truth? They were stealing from me, using me, and hiding secrets I never saw coming. I was left with nothing, or so I thought. Hook 2. Imagine being betrayed by everyone you trust. I was abandoned, manipulated, and lied to for years. My family tore me down to take control of everything I had. But the real shock came when I discovered the truth hidden in plain sight, and that's when everything changed. Combined. Hook. Hi, I'm Mackenzie. Kicked out of my own family estate, betrayed by the people I loved the most, my father-in-law, my husband, all of them. But what they didn't expect was for me to fight back. After years of manipulation and lies, I uncovered the truth that will destroy them all. And it starts now. It was a late evening in California, and the sun had just dipped behind the hills, casting an orange hue over the sprawling estate. The air was cool, but the weight of the world pressed down on me as I stood at the window of our home. The mansion, my father-in-law's domain, loomed over me, as it always had. From the outside, everything looked perfect: the manicured lawns, the glimmering windows, the grand entrance. But behind that polished facade, there was a constant tension, an unspoken rule that I wasn't quite a part of this world. I was Mackenzie, in my 30s, a lawyer, successful, respected in my field. But at home, I was merely the wife of my husband, a distant figure in a family that never truly accepted me. As a woman who had fought for everything she had, this constant reminder of my place felt like salt in an old wound. I was used to the isolation, the subtle barbs, the cold shoulders, the whispered conversations when I entered a room. But it didn't stop the ache. Not anymore. Tonight was the annual family dinner. I had tried to shake off the looming feeling that it would be just like every other year, but a part of me clung to the hope that things might change. Maybe my husband would stand up for me this time. Maybe, just maybe, my father-in-law wouldn't find a reason to belittle me in front of everyone. It was a foolish hope, but hope nonetheless. The long dining table stretched across the room, gleaming with crystal and polished silverware, the fragrance of roasted meats and baked bread filling the air. The servants moved in a silent dance around us, preparing the final touches before the evening's meal began. The entire family had gathered here under one roof, yet I couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider, looking in. My husband, William, was already seated at the table, his back straight, his face neutral. He never seemed to notice when his father made cutting remarks. Maybe it was easier for him that way. Pretend it wasn't happening. Pretend that everything was fine. I stood at the entrance, just outside the grand dining room, watching the scene unfold. My father-in-law, Thomas, was seated at the head of the table, his face hard and unforgiving. His eyes met mine briefly, but there was no warmth in them, only a cool assessment, as if I were a piece of furniture in his house. His voice rang out, commanding the attention of the room. But it wasn't the words he spoke that mattered. It was the look he gave me. It was always the same, condescending, dismissive. As the night wore on, I could feel the weight of his gaze on me, even as I tried to focus on the conversation at the table. William, as always, said little. I watched as the family laughed and joked, but there was a stark divide between them and me. A wall, invisible but unmistakable, separating me from the people I had tried so hard to belong to. And then, as if scripted, it happened. "Is there a reason you're still here, Mackenzie?" Thomas's voice cut through the air like a knife, sharp and deliberate. The room went silent. The shock rippled through me, but I quickly masked it with a tight smile. What do you mean?" I stammered, my voice wavering slightly, though I fought to maintain composure. "You heard me," he said, his tone dripping with disdain. "You don't belong here. Not in my house. It's time for you to leave." My heart skipped a beat. It wasn't just a dismissal, it was a command. And there was nothing I could do. I had no choice but to gather myself and stand up, pushing my chair back with a sharp scrape against the floor. The entire room seemed to hold its breath as I walked toward the door, my footsteps heavy but resolute. I was angry, humiliated, but something inside me snapped. Just as I reached the doorway, I heard a voice behind me. "Welcome home, madam." It was the butler, Samuel. His words were a quiet whisper, but they hit me harder than anything else that had happened tonight. Welcome home. The irony wasn't lost on me. I wasn't welcome at the family estate, but here in the shadows was a stranger offering me comfort. A strange sense of rebellion stirred inside me. For the first time in years, I wasn't simply going to take it. I wasn't going to sit back and let them treat me like this anymore. The door closed behind me with a soft thud, and I was outside. The chill of the night air hit me like a slap, and I stood there, frozen, for a moment. The weight of the family's rejection hung over me, but I refused to let it break me. The anger burned inside me, sharp and raw. How much longer was I going to endure this? How much longer would I let them control me, make me feel like I didn't matter? I stepped away from the estate's grand gates, feeling the distance between me and the life I'd tried so hard to fit into. I had never truly been a part of this world, not in my father-in-law's eyes, and certainly not in William's. I had always been the outsider. As I walked, I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. There was a message waiting for me, a friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in a while. Her words were simple, but they felt like a lifeline. I'm here for you. Don't let them break you. I let out a long breath and slid the phone back into my pocket. Maybe it was time for me to stop playing the role of the obedient wife, the silent victim. I wasn't going to let this happen again. I woke up the next morning with a deep ache in my chest. My body felt heavy, like the weight of the world was pressing down on me, but my mind was alive, buzzing with thoughts I couldn't shake. The events of last night kept replaying in my head. My father-in-law's cruel words, the cold stare of my husband as I was humiliated in front of everyone. I sat up in bed, staring at the morning light streaming through the curtains, casting long shadows across the room. The silence in the apartment felt suffocating. I had never felt so alone, and yet there was something inside me that was stirring, a quiet, simmering anger that had been building up for years. I had been passive for too long, letting my father-in-law dictate my place in this family. And my husband, he had stood by, watching it all happen, offering nothing but empty words. Well, not anymore. I couldn't keep living like this. I was done being the quiet wife who silently accepted the disdain of her in-laws. I had to take control, for my own sanity, for my own life. It wasn't just about standing up for myself anymore, it was about reclaiming my dignity. The question that haunted me all morning was, how? I knew the first step was to confront William. I needed to hear him say it, that he was willing to choose me, to choose our marriage, over his family. But I knew deep down that it wasn't going to be easy. It had never been easy with him, and I had spent years convincing myself that his silence was a form of loyalty. But that was a lie. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the conversation ahead. I wasn't going to back down. I couldn't. Not anymore. Later that afternoon, I stood in the living room, staring at William as he fiddled with his phone. His back was turned to me, but I could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. I didn't know how to begin, so I just said it. William, we need to talk. He didn't look up at first, but I could tell he heard me. After a few seconds, he lowered the phone and turned to face me. His expression was guarded, his usual calm demeanor masking the discomfort I knew he was feeling. I wasn't going to let him brush this off. I crossed my arms, trying to calm the storm that was rising inside me. Last night, you did nothing. You let him talk to me like that, and you didn't even say anything. Why? William sighed, rubbing his temples as if he were trying to stave off a headache. Mackenzie, I don't think you're seeing the bigger picture here. This is just how my father is. You know that. I don't want to make things worse. Worse? I could feel the heat rising in my chest. What do you mean, worse? How much worse can it get? I'm not asking for you to fix everything, William. I'm asking for you to take my side for once. I'm asking for you to stand up for me. He looked at me, but there was no fire in his eyes. You're overreacting. You know how my father is. This will blow over. I shook my head, feeling the last of my patience snap. That's the problem, William. You always let it blow over. And I'm sick of it. I can't keep doing this. I need you to make a choice. Me or them. The words hung in the air between us, thick with unspoken meaning. For a long moment, he just stared at me, his lips pressed into a thin line. "I don't think I can do that," he said quietly, his voice almost a whisper. My heart sank. There it was, the truth. I wasn't just fighting my father-in-law, I was fighting my husband too. And I was losing. I could feel the tears sting behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I wouldn't let him see how deeply his words hurt me. This wasn't about me begging for his support anymore. This was about my own strength. "I see," I said, my voice steady, despite the ache in my chest. "Well, I guess you've made your choice then." Without waiting for him to respond, I turned and walked out of the living room, my steps echoing in the silence of the apartment. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay here. I needed space. I needed time to think. I grabbed my coat and stepped outside, the cool air hitting me like a splash of cold water. My mind raced as I walked down the street, my thoughts a jumble of anger and disbelief. I had always known, deep down, that I couldn't count on William to stand by me. But hearing him admit it, that was a blow I hadn't been prepared for. It was a strange thing, the way reality hits you when you least expect it. I had spent so many years trying to convince myself that everything would be okay, but now I could see it for what it really was, a marriage built on silence, on avoidance, on my own reluctance to face the truth. And now I was standing on the edge of a decision I never thought I'd have to make. As I walked, I realized something. I couldn't let my father-in-law or William dictate my life anymore. I couldn't keep letting them control my future. It was time for me to take back control. That night, after I had walked for hours, I found myself sitting at the small desk in my apartment, staring at the papers scattered in front of me. They were my case files, my work, my life. But now they seemed irrelevant compared to the bigger question at hand. What was I going to do? The answer came to me slowly, but it was clear. I was done waiting for permission. I was done being passive. I was going to take charge of my own life, whether they liked it or not. As I sat there, the phone on my desk buzzed, pulling me out of my thoughts. I glanced at the screen and saw a message from my friend, Claire. She had been there for me through everything, and I knew that if anyone could help me figure out my next move, it was her. The message read, "I've got something for you. Meet me tomorrow. It's time to take control." I didn't know what she had in mind, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I was about to get the break I'd been waiting for. The office felt colder than usual, or maybe it was just me. The walls were lined with bookshelves, filled with case files and legal texts that once brought me comfort. Now they just reminded me of a life I was tired of living. A life where I was forced to play a part, where I was a passive observer in my own life. It was early morning, the kind of quiet that followed a storm, and I knew that if I didn't make a move now, I never would. The confrontation with my father-in-law still burned in my mind. His dismissive gaze, the way he said I didn't belong. The words echoed in my head, louder now, feeding the fire in me that had been smoldering for years. I had never been one to back down, but it was different this time. This wasn't just about him anymore. This was about me. I had spent too much time letting people, especially my family, decide my worth. That ended now. Sitting at my desk, I opened the drawer, pulling out the folder I had kept hidden. The evidence. The damning documents. It had taken me weeks to gather everything, to connect the dots, but now it was all laid out before me. My heart beat faster as I thought about what it meant. If I exposed him, there would be no going back. The risk was monumental, but what choice did I have? I thought of William, my husband. His silence was deafening. He was complicit in this web of lies, and the realization hit me harder than I expected. But it was his father, his family, who had always held the power. He had never once defended me. I wasn't just fighting my father-in-law anymore. I was fighting for my own dignity. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. This was it. No more hesitation. No more waiting for things to calm down. I was going to confront him, and I was going to do it today. The family estate loomed in front of me, more imposing than I remembered. The gates seemed taller, the hedges thicker, as if everything was designed to keep me out. But I wasn't just going to walk away this time. I had a plan, and I had the evidence. It was time to confront him. I parked my car, the engine still running for a moment before I killed it. I could hear the hum of the world outside, but in here, it was eerily silent. The tension in my chest tightened, but I didn't falter. I could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on me, but I knew it was the only way forward. I walked up the steps of the grand mansion, my heels clicking sharply against the marble. The door opened before I could even knock, one of the servants looking surprised to see me, but not questioning it. I was a wife, after all. "I need to speak to your father," I said, my voice calm but firm. I wasn't here to ask permission. I was here to demand a conversation, one that should have happened years ago. Inside, the house smelled like old leather and polished wood, a smell that had once comforted me, but now felt suffocating. I was led through the vast hallways, passing rooms I'd only entered a few times. Finally, I found myself in his study. There he was, sitting behind his massive desk, the patriarch of this family who had always treated me like an outsider. He didn't even look up when I entered, just continued to shuffle papers. "I'm here, and we need to talk," I said, my voice steady. I didn't want to show how much I was shaking inside, how much I feared what was coming next. He looked up slowly, eyes narrowing as he took in the sight of me. "What's this about?" he asked, voice dripping with disdain. "I'm done being silent," I said, the words coming out in a rush. "I know what you've been doing. I have the evidence, and I'm not going to let you keep running this family like it's your personal empire. I'm done." He leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "You think you have evidence? You think you can control what happens here?" His voice was calm, too calm, and it sent a shiver down my spine. "I'm not here for your approval," I continued, my resolve hardening. "I've seen the papers, the way you've manipulated the family finances, the way you've made everything about power. It ends now." He leaned forward, eyes locking onto mine with a cold intensity. "You're making a mistake, Mackenzie. You don't know what you're dealing with. You think your little documents can change anything? You think anyone will believe you over me? You're nothing in this family." His words were like a slap, but I didn't flinch. I knew I was walking on dangerous ground, but there was no turning back. "I know exactly what I'm doing," I said, holding up the file. "And you're going to pay for it." There was a moment of silence, a long pause where neither of us moved. Then he spoke, his voice low and dangerous. "You'll regret this," he said, leaning back in his chair, a twisted smile on his face. "You're not prepared for the war you're starting." But I was prepared. I had to be. Just as the conversation started to feel like it was reaching its breaking point, there was a knock at the door. My father-in-law's expression didn't change, but I saw a flicker of recognition in his eyes. The door opened, and someone I didn't expect to see stepped into the room. Diana, his longtime assistant, the one person who had always kept to herself, never making waves. She stepped forward, her eyes meeting mine with a look that I couldn't quite read. "Mackenzie," she said quietly, "I know what's going on." The words were like a bombshell, and I could feel the ground shift beneath me. "I've been aware of what's been happening for years," she continued, her voice steady. "I didn't know how to speak out, but I can't stay silent anymore." My breath caught in my throat. Diana was the last person I expected to support me, but here she was, standing beside me in this moment of truth. She glanced at my father-in-law, then turned to me. "I can help you. I've seen the documents too." The shock of her support was almost too much to process. But as she handed me a key piece of evidence, the final piece I needed, I realized something. This battle was far from over, but now I had the upper hand. But then she dropped another bombshell. "Your husband knew. He's been aware of all of this, but he never said a word." The words hit me like a punch in the stomach. William had known? How could he have stayed silent all this time? I turned away, trying to keep my composure, but it was impossible. I felt betrayed, shattered, and yet there was no time for tears. This wasn't just about my father-in-law anymore. I had to decide what to do next, and fast. The evening ended in silence, and as I left the family estate, the weight of everything that had happened settled in. I was no longer just a passive participant. I had the truth, the power, and now it was up to me to decide how to use it. I didn't have time to reflect long, though. As soon as I got back to my apartment, the phone rang. It was from my father-in-law's lawyer. "Back off, Mackenzie," the voice on the other end hissed. "You don't know what you're getting into. Stop now, or your career will be over before it even begins." I hung up without saying a word, my mind racing. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. I had made my choice. There was no turning back now. The quiet of my apartment was suffocating that morning. The weight of the decision I'd made the night before was still pressing down on me, but my resolve remained firm. I sat at the kitchen table, the harsh light from the window casting long shadows across the room. It felt like the calm before the storm, a moment of peace before everything I'd set in motion came crashing into the public eye. I stared at my phone, the documents I'd gathered still fresh in my mind. The press conference was looming, and though I felt the rising tide of anxiety, I knew there was no turning back now. I couldn't allow myself to shrink away from what I had to do. The truth had been hidden for far too long, buried beneath layers of lies and manipulation. My father-in-law had tried to dismiss me, shut me out, and make me feel insignificant, but I wasn't going to be quiet anymore. I was done being silent. The time for talking was over. It was time to act. I took a deep breath, forcing my mind to focus. This wasn't just about me or my father-in-law. It was about standing up to everything that had held me back. I wasn't a guest in my own life anymore. I wasn't going to let anyone, not even my own husband, define my worth. The door opened with a soft creak. William stepped into the apartment, his face a mask of frustration and disbelief. His eyes locked onto mine, but he didn't say a word at first. The tension between us was so thick I could almost taste it. He had been avoiding me since the confrontation with his father, and now here he was, standing in front of me as if nothing had changed. "Are you really going through with this?" he finally asked, his voice low, laced with a sense of betrayal. I didn't flinch. "Yes, William. I'm going through with it." He shook his head slowly, his expression turning bitter. "You don't understand the consequences. You're going to ruin everything. This isn't just about you, Mackenzie. It's about the family. It's about what we've built." "Built?" I repeated, my voice rising in frustration. "What about what you've destroyed? The lies, the manipulation? You're part of it too, William." His face faltered, but he quickly regained his composure. "I didn't ask for any of this. You think I'm happy about the way things have been going? But this could ruin us. You're jeopardizing everything. You want to expose all of this to the world? For what?" I felt my heart hammering in my chest, but I stood firm. "I'm not jeopardizing anything. I'm exposing the truth. And if the family falls apart because of that, then so be it." William's eyes narrowed. "You're overreacting. We'll fix this. It's just a misunderstanding, Mackenzie. We can take care of it quietly." "A misunderstanding?" I shot back. "There's no misunderstanding here. I've seen the truth, and I won't let it stay buried." His hands clenched into fists at his sides. "You're going to destroy us all for your sense of righteousness? For your need to be right?" "This isn't about being right," I said, my voice steady. "This is about doing what's right. And I won't back down." The silence between us stretched for what felt like forever. Then, just when I thought he might say something, anything, his words hit me like a sledgehammer. "I helped him," he muttered, barely audible. "I helped my father cover it up. I've always known what was going on, but I kept quiet because I didn't want to lose everything." The confession echoed in the air, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. I wanted to shout, to scream at him for everything he had done. But all I could do was stare at him, the weight of his betrayal settling over me like a stone in my chest. "You knew?" I whispered, my voice barely a sound. He nodded, his face flushed with shame. "I didn't want to lose everything, Mackenzie. The business, the family name, the money. I thought I could fix it without anyone knowing." I stood up, my legs shaky, but my resolve unshaken. You were complicit in this, William. You were just as much a part of the lies as he was. And now you expect me to stay quiet? I don't know what you want me to say, he said, his voice cracking. I never meant for any of this to happen. I thought you'd understand. This is our life, our future. Not anymore, I said coldly. This is where I draw the line. You've chosen your family's money over me, over what's right, and I'm done. I'm done with you. Done with this. William's face contorted in pain. You don't mean that. We can fix this, Mackenzie. We can. But I was already walking past him, my decision made. There was nothing left to say. The next day, I sat alone at a small cafe, sipping my coffee but barely tasting it. My mind was racing, the gravity of everything that had happened settling in. I had just sent the documents to the press, and now the truth was out there. I could feel the weight of the decision I'd made, heavy but necessary. It wasn't just about exposing my father-in-law anymore. It was about reclaiming myself. It was about standing up for the woman I had become, the woman who was tired of being silenced. But as I sat there, looking out the window at the busy street, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, my stomach sinking as I saw the name of my father-in-law's lawyer flashing in bold letters. With a sigh, I picked up the phone. You've made a grave mistake, Mackenzie. The lawyer's voice was icy. If you don't retract this information, if you don't take it all back, I will ruin your career. Your reputation will be destroyed, and you will never practice law again. The words felt like a slap, but they didn't break me. I held my phone tightly, a cold anger building inside me. You're too late, I said, my voice unwavering. The truth is already out there, and I'm not backing down. I hung up without waiting for a response, my fingers trembling, but my heart resolute. As I stepped out of the cafe, I realized that no matter what came next, there was no going back. I had taken the first step, and I wasn't going to let anyone stop me. That evening, I watched the news, the press conference footage flashing across the screen. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched the media explode with the truth. Some people cheered me on, others vilified me, but the one thing that couldn't be denied was that the truth was out. The phone buzzed again. It was a message from William. Please come home. We can fix this. Let's make it right. I felt nothing. I'd made my decision. There was no turning back. Just as I thought the storm was calming, a message came through. A simple text, but one that made my blood run cold. This is just the beginning. You're not out of this yet. The morning light barely filtered through the curtains of my apartment, yet it was enough to stir a knot in my stomach. It had been a few days since the public reveal. The truth about my father-in-law's corruption was out there, but I still couldn't shake the feeling that the storm was far from over. I'd exposed them, but at what cost? I felt the weight of every choice pressing down on me, but there was no going back now. I walked to the kitchen, my mind racing as I made a cup of coffee. The warmth of the mug in my hands offered some comfort, but the quiet around me was suffocating. The press had already gotten their claws into the story, and the backlash had begun. The media was tearing apart everything my husband's family had built, and as much as I felt relief in knowing the truth was out, I couldn't escape the growing tension in my chest. I looked around the room, wondering who I could trust now. My father-in-law, once the patriarch of the family, had been exposed as a criminal. My husband had betrayed me in the worst way possible. I felt isolated, like a stranger in my own life, but the anger inside me burned brighter than the isolation. I had a fight on my hands, and I wasn't going to let it end here. The door creaked open, snapping me out of my thoughts. I hadn't expected to see him today, but there he was. William, my husband. His face was a mixture of frustration and disbelief. His eyes scanned the room before locking onto mine. "You really did it," he said, his voice colder than I'd ever heard it before. "Of course I did," I replied, my voice steady. I couldn't let him see how much his disappointment still hurt. I couldn't let him control me any longer. He stepped closer, his hands buried in his pockets. "You've ruined everything, Mackenzie. Everything we've worked for. It's all falling apart." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "No, William." What you've built isn't worth anything if it's built on lies. His face flushed with anger. You think this is about lies? You think this is about your damn crusade for justice? He stepped closer, his voice rising. It's about our family, Mackenzie, about our future. You can't just destroy it because you feel slighted. I stood tall, meeting his gaze. You've chosen your father's empire over me, over what's right. And I'm done. I'm done being silent. You think I didn't notice all these years? You think I didn't see how you cowered before him? How you've let him control us? His eyes darkened, and for a moment, I saw the man I once loved, the man I thought I knew. But it didn't matter anymore. The truth had a way of stripping away illusions. I've done what I had to do to protect us, he muttered. To protect you. To protect me? I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. You don't protect me, William. You've kept me in the shadows while you and your father continued with your lies. You think that's protecting me? He stepped back, his expression unreadable. You don't understand the consequences of this, Mackenzie. This isn't just about a business or a reputation. This is about everything. I'm done living in your shadow, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I'm done being a pawn in your game. You're not the man I thought you were. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could, something shifted in his eyes. His jaw tightened, and he looked away. The next words came out of his mouth in a voice almost too quiet to hear. I helped him. I helped my father cover this up. The words hit me like a freight train. I staggered back, the ground feeling unsteady beneath me. I wanted to scream, to lash out at him, but I stood frozen, my thoughts spinning in a million directions. You? I whispered. You knew? He nodded slowly, his eyes filled with shame. I didn't want to lose everything. I thought I could fix it without anyone finding out. I thought it would go away. The realization hit me with the force of a tidal wave. The man I had married, the one I had trusted more than anyone, was just as complicit as his father. He was part of the lies, part of the corruption, and all along, I had been the fool, believing he would stand by me. The silence between us was deafening. I can't believe this, I said, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and disbelief. You knew, and you let it go on. You let it all happen, and now you want me to stop? He reached out, but I stepped back, unable to even look at him. I'm not your ally, William. I'm not your accomplice. I'm not going to sit by and watch you destroy everything. You don't get it. I'm trying to protect you, he said, desperation creeping into his voice. No, I snapped, shaking my head. You're protecting yourself. You're protecting your family's name. You've never once thought about what's right. Not once. He opened his mouth to respond, but I didn't let him. I'm done, I said, my voice cold. You've betrayed me. There's nothing left for us here. I turned on my heel and walked out, my heart pounding in my chest, but this time it wasn't fear I felt. It was resolve. This was it. There was no going back now. The next day, I sat alone in a cafe, my coffee cold in front of me. I hadn't slept much the night before. The betrayal still weighed heavily on me, but something in me had snapped. My husband's admission had shattered the last of the illusions I had about our life together. Now, there was only the truth, and I was done running from it. I pulled out my phone and opened the email from the journalist I'd met a few days earlier. His team had done the groundwork, and now everything was ready. It was time. I could feel the tension in my bones as I hovered over the send button. Just then, my phone buzzed with an incoming message. I didn't recognize the number, but my stomach dropped as I read the chilling message. Stop now or you'll regret it. I closed my eyes, the words gnawing at my resolve, but there was no going back. Not anymore. I pressed send, sending the information out into the world, knowing that once the truth was out there, nothing would ever be the same. The phone rang just as I stood to leave. I glanced at the screen. Unknown number. Hesitant, I answered. You don't know what you've started. The voice on the other end was low, almost predatory. It's too late to stop now. The call ended before I could respond, and I stared at the phone, my mind racing. The fight had only just begun, and now the consequences would be far-reaching. The air in the family estate was thick with tension as I walked toward the private study. My mind was racing, but I remained composed. This was it. I had spent too long in silence, too long allowing the men in my life to control the narrative. Now, I was ready to face my father-in-law and force him to confess the truth. I couldn't afford to back down, not now. I knocked lightly on the door, my heart pounding in my chest. When he called out, I entered, the door closing softly behind me. He was sitting behind his large mahogany desk, looking more powerful than ever. His presence, always imposing, felt suffocating in the silence that hung between us. "Mackenzie," he said, his voice smooth, cold. "I assume this visit is not for pleasantries." I took a deep breath, gathering my strength. "No, it's not," I replied, walking further into the room. "We need to talk about the corruption you've been hiding from the world." He leaned back in his chair, an almost amused smile playing at the corner of his lips. "Corruption? My dear, I think you've let your imagination run wild. I've built this family's legacy with hard work and dedication. There's nothing corrupt about it." "Don't lie to me," I said, my voice steady but firm. "I have proof, and I'm not leaving here until you explain what you've done." His eyes hardened, and for a moment, I thought he might lash out. But instead, he remained calm, a master of control. "You think exposing me will change anything? You think anyone will believe you over me?" I could feel the rage bubbling up inside me, but I forced myself to stay composed. He was trying to intimidate me, but I wasn't backing down. I stepped forward, placing the documents I had gathered on his desk. "This is just the beginning. You can deny it all you want, but I will make sure the world knows the truth." He didn't flinch, his gaze unwavering. "You are playing a dangerous game, Mackenzie. The more you push, the more you'll lose." I held his gaze, determined. "I'm not afraid of losing. I'm afraid of what will happen if I stay silent." For a moment, there was silence between us, the weight of our confrontation sinking in. Then, just as I thought he might give in, he leaned forward, his voice dropping to a low, almost casual tone. "You should be careful, Mackenzie. Your husband, your precious husband, is just as involved in all of this as I am." My breath caught in my throat. "What are you talking about?" He smirked, clearly enjoying the shock on my face. "Your husband wasn't just a bystander. He's been helping me with the family's business dealings from the start. He's not innocent in this." I stood frozen, the world tilting beneath me. My husband, my partner, the man I had trusted more than anyone, was just as guilty as his father. The very idea that he was involved in this betrayal was too much to process. "You're lying," I whispered, my voice cracking with disbelief. "I'm not," he replied coolly. "You'll find that your husband has been making deals with me, covering up a lot more than you realize. He's as much a part of this family's legacy as I am." The room seemed to spin as I took in his words. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but instead, I stood there, struggling to maintain control. This was the moment I had feared the most. The betrayal had gone deeper than I could have ever imagined, but it was also the moment I realized I had to fight alone. I turned and walked out of the room, my heart pounding in my chest. I had come here for answers, but I had uncovered a truth that shattered everything. Now, I had to face my husband, the man I had shared my life with, and demand the truth from him. Back in the silence of my apartment, I sat down, my mind reeling. The weight of everything, the betrayal, the lies, the corruption, felt unbearable. I had trusted my husband, built a life with him, and now I knew that everything was a lie. My hands trembled as I poured myself a glass of water, trying to calm the storm inside me. But the anger, the hurt, it was too much to hold back. I couldn't trust anyone anymore. Not my father-in-law, not my husband. My life, everything I had built, was crumbling around me. But deep down, I knew I couldn't stop now. I had already exposed the family's corruption, and there was no going back. I had to take the next step, even if it meant losing everything. As I sat there, lost in thought, my phone buzzed. The message was from my lawyer. "They're moving assets. Properties are being liquidated. They're trying to cover their tracks." The realization hit me like a slap in the face. My family's empire wasn't just built on lies. It was built on stolen money, dirty deals, and now they were trying to erase all traces of it. I knew I had to act fast. If I didn't, everything would be buried, and the truth would never come out. The fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. The next morning, I met with the journalist, my ally in this fight. I outlined my plan. We were going to release everything, every piece of evidence I had. The truth was too important to let it slip away. But the journalist hesitated, caution written all over his face. Mackenzie, are you sure? Once this goes public, there's no going back. You could be putting yourself in grave danger. I stared at him, resolute. I don't care. This isn't just about me anymore. It's about stopping them. It's about justice. Just then, my phone buzzed again. I glanced at the screen. It was a message from an old friend, someone I hadn't seen in years but trusted implicitly. Mackenzie, the message read. You need to be careful. I have some intel that might help, but exposing everything without protection could make you a target. They'll come after you. My heart raced. The stakes were higher than I'd imagined. I hadn't expected this, but I knew I couldn't back down. Not now, not after everything I'd lost. That evening, I sat in my apartment, phone in hand. I stared at the message from my husband. He wanted to meet, to explain himself. But I already knew there was nothing he could say that would change what I knew. I hesitated, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. I had already made up my mind, but his message was a last-ditch attempt to manipulate me, to convince me that everything could go back to normal if I just forgave him. I looked down at the files I had gathered, the truth at my fingertips. There was no turning back now. My phone rang again, and I picked it up without thinking. The voice on the other end was familiar but cold. You'll regret this, the voice said. You think you're in control, but we'll make sure you disappear. This is your last chance to back off. I felt my pulse quicken, but I didn't hesitate. I pressed send. The truth was out now, and there was no going back. The morning after everything had shattered, I sat in my apartment, staring out the window. The weight of the media storm, the public's outrage, and the threats from my father-in-law's lawyer pressed down on me. Yet despite the chaos surrounding me, there was a sense of clarity that had settled within me. I had made the decision to take control. There was no turning back now. I had spent so many years letting others dictate my life, bending to the will of the men in my family, letting their shadows loom over me. But now I was done. I couldn't allow them to take any more from me. As the morning light filtered through the blinds, I let the silence envelop me. My heart was heavy with the consequences of my choices, but they had to be made. The betrayal from my husband still stung, but his involvement in this mess had shown me just how deep the corruption ran. The only way forward was to confront it head-on. The decision to go public was mine, but the truth, that was a power I had yet to fully understand. I had exposed the family's crimes, but it was only the beginning. Now, I had to finish what I started. I was ready. But just as I made that decision, my phone buzzed. The message was chilling. We know where you're headed. Don't make us stop you. I froze. The voice of fear tried to creep in, but I shoved it aside. This was it. I wasn't backing down. The family estate felt like a fortress as I approached. The mansion loomed large, its stone walls cold and imposing. I wasn't sure if I felt more anger or anticipation. It didn't matter. I was walking into the heart of the enemy's lair, ready to expose the rot within. When I entered the main dining room, the family was gathered, some whispering in hushed tones. As I stepped forward, silence fell over the room. I wasn't the same woman they had dismissed before. My voice, when it came, was strong, clear, and unwavering. I know what you've been doing, I began. The corruption, the lies, the deceit, and I'm not walking away until you face the consequences. My father-in-law's expression never wavered, but his eyes darkened. You really think you can take this all down, Mackenzie? You're in over your head. I didn't flinch. I'm not afraid of you. Her husband stayed quiet at first, his gaze flickering between his father and me. Then slowly he stood. This is madness, he said, his voice shaky. You're making a mistake. Do you have any idea what this will do to us? I turned to face him, heart pounding. What's your excuse? Your father's crimes run deep, and you're just as guilty. What were you hoping for? That I'd back down? The room was tense. Everyone could feel it. The unraveling of the empire, the fall of the family name. But before I could press further, my husband dropped a bombshell. I've been working with a faction within the family, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. We've been planning a deal that would secure everything. Your crusade, it's going to destroy you. My stomach dropped. The betrayal was deeper than I had imagined. My husband wasn't just complicit. He was actively working against me. And now I had no choice but to go to war, not just with my father-in-law, but with the man I had loved. Later that night, I retreated to the family estate's private library, seeking refuge in the shadows. The enormity of the confrontation was settling in. The pieces were falling into place. This fight wasn't just for justice, but for my own survival. I ran my hands over the papers in front of me, documents my mother-in-law had left behind, seemingly innocent at first. But one letter caught my eye. It was a will, one that my father-in-law had tampered with, one that would have secured everything for me had he not altered it. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. The power he had over the family, the control he'd held, it was all built on a lie. And now, I had the upper hand. The documents were a gift, a weapon. This was the leverage I needed. With this, I could shift the power dynamics. I could take back what was rightfully mine. The following morning, I sat at the corporate headquarters. I had to act quickly, and I had a plan. I was going to take control of the family's wealth and business interests. The legal fight would be fierce, but I had the will, the evidence, and the media behind me. I was going to challenge the altered will, make it public, and take back everything that had been stolen from me. But as I prepared to make my move, the call came. My father-in-law's lawyer. He threatened me with fabricated evidence, lies meant to destroy my reputation. They were playing dirty, trying to intimidate me into silence. But I wouldn't be silenced, not anymore. I stared at the phone, the weight of everything pressing down on me. This was it, the final battle. I had come too far to turn back now. Back at the family estate, I stood in front of the press, ready to make my final move. The weight of the world was on my shoulders, but my resolve was stronger than ever. The media was waiting, the cameras rolling, the truth ready to be exposed. Just as I took a deep breath and prepared to speak, my phone rang again. I glanced down at the screen. The unknown number. My hand shook slightly as I answered it. "You have no idea what you've just done," the voice said, cold and menacing. "If you go through with this, we'll make sure it's the last thing you ever do." I felt my pulse race, but I knew this wasn't the time to hesitate. The fight had already begun. I wasn't backing down. I pressed send, and the story broke. The truth was out, and I knew this war was far from over. The evening air was cool as I stood in front of the family estate, watching the sun dip below the horizon. My mind was clouded, but the weight of the decision ahead felt like a sharp clarity cutting through the fog. It had been a long, brutal road, but this was the moment I had been building toward for so long. The final move. I had already lost so much, the trust of my husband, the love I thought we had, and the respect of the family I once thought I could belong to. But at least now, I was fighting for something real, my own future, the truth. It had to be told, no matter the cost. But as I stood there, the message from my estranged mother echoed in my mind. "You've been strong for everyone, but you need to be strong for yourself now." I hadn't realized until that moment just how much I'd been living for others, fighting their battles, making their choices. I had ignored my own needs for too long, but now I had to make this decision for me. As I prepared myself for what was to come, the phone rang. It was an unknown number. I hesitated before answering. "We know where you're headed. Don't make us stop you," a cold voice warned. My heart skipped a beat, but I didn't flinch. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about owning my power, reclaiming what had been taken from me. And there was no way I was backing down. The family estate loomed ahead. its cold stone walls standing tall and imposing. I entered the study where my father-in-law was waiting. The tension in the air was thick, like a storm waiting to break. His expression was unreadable, but I could see the storm in his eyes. He knew this was it. I had the upper hand, and I wasn't about to let him escape. "Sit down," I said, my voice steady despite the fury bubbling inside. "It's time you answered for everything." His face hardened, and he leaned back in his chair, trying to maintain his composure. "You think you can bring all this down on us?" You're wasting your time, Mackenzie." "I'm wasting my time?" I took a step closer, never breaking eye contact. "No. You've been wasting my time for years, manipulating me, keeping me in the dark while you lined your pockets." He scoffed, dismissing my words. "You have no proof." I smiled, the evidence I had gathered from the family business files still in my grasp. "Actually, I do." I dropped the papers onto the table, and the air seemed to freeze. There, in black and white, were the documents showing the embezzlement that had been siphoning money from the estate. The betrayal ran deeper than I thought. He tried to spin it, but I wasn't having it. "You're done. This time the truth comes out." Later that evening, I walked into the grand dining room where my husband waited. The room was dim, lit only by the flickering glow of candlelight. A cold, suffocating silence hung in the air. I didn't even sit down. I stood tall, knowing this would be the hardest conversation of my life. "You've been silent through everything, hiding behind your father's lies. But now, it's time to face me," I said, my voice low and controlled. His eyes darted nervously. "Mackenzie, this isn't what you think. You're right," I cut him off. "It's worse than I thought. You've been part of this all along, haven't you? Working behind my back, helping your father secure deals that could ruin me." His face fell. For a moment he was silent, guilt written all over him. Then his shoulders slumped. "I never supported you, Mackenzie. The only thing I cared about was our legacy, the family's wealth. You don't understand." My heart sank, but I knew what I had to do. "I don't need your approval. I never did. The marriage, it's over." There was no more pretending, no more illusions. The person I loved had chosen everything else over me, and now he was nothing but another obstacle in my way. The morning after, I sat in the family's legal office, the quiet hum of the city outside barely breaking through my thoughts. The papers were ready, my strategy was set, I had everything I needed to take back control. The lawsuit was filed, public defamation, embezzlement, everything exposed, the family's secrets, now mine to wield. But as I sat there, staring at the files in front of me, my phone buzzed again. An unknown number. I answered with a sinking feeling in my stomach. "I've made sure the legal action won't go through. You're not going to win this." My husband's voice crackled through the line. I stood, my blood running cold. He had been playing both sides, trying to sabotage everything I had fought for. That was it. I couldn't rely on legal means anymore. I had to take control another way. There was no turning back now. Hours later, I stood outside the courthouse, the sun dipping low in the sky. The legal battle had begun, but I knew this wasn't the end. It was just another step. As I walked toward my car, I felt my phone buzz again. A final message, a threat I knew would change everything. "You've made a mistake, Mackenzie. We're not done with you yet." The weight of the threat pressed down on me, but I was done being afraid. This was my moment. The gloves were off. I turned and walked away from the courthouse, knowing my battle was far from over. But this time, I wasn't running anymore. The first light of dawn broke over the horizon as I stood outside the family estate, staring at the sprawling grounds that once symbolized everything I thought I wanted. The mansion, the wealth, the legacy, all of it had been a lie. And yet, here I was, at the edge of a new beginning. The past had been an anchor around my neck, dragging me down with its lies and betrayals. But now, with the final step ahead, I felt the weight lifting. The decision was mine to make, and it had been long overdue. I had lost my marriage. I had lost my trust in the people closest to me. But I had gained something stronger, my resolve. The decision to expose the truth had cost me dearly, but it had also set me free. I wasn't just doing this for myself anymore. I was doing it for every moment I had let slide, every lie I had swallowed, every betrayal I had endured. Just as I was preparing to act, a letter arrived. The envelope was plain, the handwriting unfamiliar. My heart skipped a beat as I tore it open. Inside was a single line that made my blood run cold. You know the final secret. It's yours to reveal, or use to your advantage later. The letter offered me a choice. It was a dangerous game, but I had come this far. I couldn't back down now. I folded the letter carefully and tucked it into my bag. There would be time to decide later, but for now, the truth would be exposed. I was ready. By mid-morning, the media had gathered outside the family estate. The reporters were already buzzing with questions, cameras flashing as I made my way to the podium. This was it, the moment I had been building toward, the final reveal. The air was thick with anticipation as I stepped into the spotlight. I could feel their eyes on me, waiting for the truth to spill from my lips. But this wasn't just about clearing my name. This was about taking back control, about exposing the darkness that had plagued my family for years. I stand before you today, not as a victim, but as a survivor, I began, my voice steady, though my heart raced. For years, I've watched as the corruption in my family destroyed lives, my life included. I have watched my father-in-law manipulate, steal, and deceive to build his empire. I have watched my own husband turn a blind eye, his loyalty to the family legacy outweighing his loyalty to me. I paused, letting the words sink in. The silence in the room was deafening, the weight of the truth settling in. I held up the documents. This is the proof. Documents that expose my father-in-law's illegal activities, his embezzlement, his lies. And this, I added, pointing to a photograph of my husband with the same man he had betrayed me for, is the man who was supposed to be my partner, my equal, the man who, in his greed, chose this legacy over everything else. The media erupted, but before I could continue, a voice interrupted. I didn't do it, my husband said, stepping forward from the back of the room. His face was pale, his voice trembling. This is all a misunderstanding. You're turning this into something it's not. I didn't flinch. You're a liar and you know it, I snapped. The truth is out now. Everyone will see what you really are. Later that afternoon, the courtroom was packed. The legal battle had begun, and I was determined to win. My father-in-law's empire was crumbling before him, and now I had the final piece, my husband's betrayal exposed for all to see. As the trial unfolded, I took control, presenting evidence that dismantled their entire defense. My father-in-law's arrogance was palpable, but it was nothing compared to the shock that ran through the room when a surprise witness took the stand. My estranged mother. She stepped into the courtroom, her presence a shock to everyone, including me. She had been watching from the sidelines, but now she was ready to speak the truth. With calm authority, she told the court about the hidden documents, the alterations to the will, and the lies that had been spun. Her testimony was the final blow to the family's defense. With the case in my favor, I knew the battle was over. The family had lost, and I had won. Later that evening, I found myself standing alone in the family estate's garden, the setting sun casting a warm glow over the estate. I had won the legal battle, but more than that, I had won my freedom. The past was now behind me, and the future, uncertain as it was, lay ahead. As I walked through the garden, reflecting on everything I had been through, I felt something I hadn't in years: peace. The past no longer defined me. I had learned to let go of the pain, the loss, the betrayal. Just as I was about to leave, my phone rang. I answered without thinking. Mackenzie, the voice on the other end said, I've been watching you, and I have an opportunity for you. A new path forward. One that could change everything. I paused, my heart skipping. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the chance to step into the future, free from the chains of my past. I walked away from the family estate, my back straight, my steps purposeful. The weight of the last few months was still with me, but I was no longer weighed down by it. I had reclaimed my life, and nothing would stop me now. As I reached the car, I turned to look back one last time. The estate, once a symbol of everything I had lost, now seemed distant, like a chapter that had finally closed. But just as I stepped into the car, I saw him, my husband. He stood at the gates, his figure small and broken. He called out to me, but I didn't turn around. I was done. The past is behind you, I thought, but the future is waiting for you to step into it. And I did.